News Couch. Hello, and thanks for tuning in. As always, this is Reverend JR, and today we're going to take a look at a couple things on the internet. You may have come across them, you may not have done so, but I'm going to present them to you nonetheless. We're going to have some fun today. I didn't have time for a video last week, so I do apologize, but you're getting one this week. So we're good. At least I hope so. First thing we're going to look at is an article from Vice. Philly D talked about this a little bit. An Indian man is suing his parents for conceiving him without his consent. The man's mother said, "That's fine, but don't expect me to go easy on you. I will destroy you in court." So, the basic premise is, as we'll get into here, he believes that his parents should be responsible for him because they gave birth to him. And I kind of agree with this sentiment. If you have a child, it's your obligation to take care of it, the same as if you have, a pet, more or less. Your child is like your pet. If your child is permanently deformed or has something that will not allow them to function properly, and you had that child, it should be your responsibility to take care of it. And this is where the welfare state comes in a little bit. Because we should have that safety net for parents who are unable to do so. And again, I'm firmly in the belief of, mating licenses, but that's a little beyond the scope of this, I guess. Let's just jump right into it. A 27-year-old man is attempting to sue his parents on the basis that he never consented to being born. Which is fair enough. I didn't consent to being born either. I don't think that you did. We've all been there. Mumbai businessman Raphael Samuel identifies as an anti-natalist, which means that he believes birth has a negative value and procreation is morally wrong. I won't say that. I won't agree with that. I think procreation is fine as long as you're willing to accept the burden of taking care of the thing you create and keeping it as healthy and comfortable as possible for as long as it needs, including into adulthood. Because again, I don't have any choice in whether or not I come into existence, and it's generally frowned upon if I attempt to take myself out of existence. Not that I want to, but, from a theoretical standpoint, it's actually illegal to try to kill yourself in this country, or to have someone else help you to do it, and anything like that. So yeah, I'm effectively forced to be here unless I want to break the law or die painfully, and I had no choice in being here in the first place. So yes, I can definitely sympathize with that mindset. At the same time, I don't mind being here so much. I can be a productive member of society, and as such, I'm trying to be. But I don't feel that I should be forced into it, and neither should anyone else. When you find me the person who chose to be here, then I'll show you the person who should be forced to participate in society. Is kind of my view on it. Now, I think it is morally a good thing to be a benefit to society, but again, I don't think anyone should be required to do so. Of course, society would fall apart if we didn't, but nonetheless. And since it's impossible to ask an unborn child whether they want to be brought into the world, Raphael argues it's wrong to have them at all. Again, I don't go quite that far. I mean, life is suffering if you have, chronic pain when you're born, and there's literally nothing you can do about it in some cases. Or you're a child that develops some kind of cancer and dies prematurely, or has some other form of suffering for your entire life, like if polio gets you. But I mean, I don't agree that it's wrong in principle. I just agree that it's wrong to force someone to be alive and then force them to do things in society. It was not our decision to be born, he told the BBC, which I think is a fair point. And so, in his view, it's perfectly reasonable to demand recompense. And again, I kind of agree with that. If I were unable, or even to a point unwilling, because I didn't want to, and I didn't ask to be born, should I have the right to say I don't want to participate in society? But I also don't want to die in any way that's painful. You see what I'm saying there? At the very least, Raphael believes that he should be paid for his existence. Again, I could get behind that. I wish somebody would pay me just to be alive as well. I'm sure we all do. But it wouldn't work out very well that way if we did. And I'm not sure exactly what the alternative is, honestly. But again, I don't feel that having children is a right. I feel that it's a responsibility. And it should be revocable at any moment when you abuse it. If we are born without our consent, we should be maintained for the rest of our life, he declares in a YouTube video. And more or less I agree. Human life has sanctity, right? And if human life is important enough that we don't want to be engaged in suffering, then I think maybe there is some listening we ought to do to this idea, curbing the population a little bit by means of not having so many kids. I don't see that I should be forced to do things just because I'm alive. Although I'm going to continue to do so because I enjoy working, but that's neither here nor there. It should be a choice. In Raphael's estimation, delivering another person into the world and forcing them to have a career is tantamount to kidnapping and slavery. Well, let me ask you this. If I had someone else's child, and I forced them to stay in my house, and then forced them to get a job, what's the difference? Just something to think about. I can't leave the planet. I have to work if I want to eat, more or less. Unless, again, I am disabled or something. But the point remains, what's my option? You know. But I don't want to die, so I'm happy to continue working for what I have. And while he does concede that it's not actually possible to ask an unborn child to consent to its own life, he maintains it's inherently unethical to reproduce for the sake of themselves and the state of the planet. Which again, yay or nay, I don't know. The planet's going to be here even if we wreck it. So if we do something to cause ourselves to become extinct, the planet's going to continue. Just maybe with a different kind of life upon it. There's no point to humanity, he says. So many people are suffering, he claims. If humanity is extinct, Earth and animals would be happier. See, I don't know about that either. I mean, we've made life pretty good for a lot of species that we've kept around. Dogs and cats and cows and pigs and chickens. And we've given them virtually the best life they can have while still making them productive to us. More or less. So, I don't know if that's exactly correct. Because suddenly, the cows would have no one protecting them and they would almost assuredly die off. And so on. But we'll see. That's not to say that they're not on side with Raphael's general argument, though. Mum said she wished she had met me before I was born, and that if she did, she definitely wouldn't have had me. Which, you know, is fair enough, I guess. But what you're saying there's the sticky part, is you know that they can't give consent, and you know that if they could give consent and wouldn't, that you wouldn't have a child. But you're still continuing to have children. Even though you understand this. You would have had a different child, who may also not have consented. Anyway, Raphael explained to the BBC while his mother posted on his Facebook page admitting that if Raphael could come up with a rational explanation as to how we could have sought his consent to be born, I will accept my fault. Which, in a weird way, says, well, if that person in the coma could have just shown a way to give their consent to stay alive, we wouldn't have had to pull the plug on them, in a way. Just throwing it out there. And then they bring up the point that it looks kind of weird and fishy, and so on, but we're gonna end that article there and move on to the next thing. With David Reeves Ministries, the incredible design of the giraffe. So let's take a look at Mr. Reeves. I think it's Reeves.
Hi, I'm David Reeves. We're here in beautiful South Africa, just on the outskirts of Johannesburg at the Lion and Safari Park.
I'm reminded of Dr. Bombay.
We are going on a safari, see the lions from the Ferrari. Hope we do not get them malaria. It's safari time.
We have been looking at magnificent wildlife all week long, but we're about to go in and check out possibly some cheetahs and giraffes.
I wonder if David blessed the rains down in Africa.
And see what these magnificent creatures are up to.
You hear that? Giraffes are magnificent. Well, there may be lions and other things. It says giraffe right in the title, so I hope I'm not spoiling anything. Hashtag spoiler alert.
Let's go take a look.
Alright, Dave. Let's go take a look. Come on, Dave. Let's go take a look. Was that really necessary, Dave? I didn't want to stare at your butt for like 10 seconds. I want to see the giraffes. I want to see the animals. Because they're amazing.
What stands up to 19 feet tall, weighs 3,000 pounds, has gangly legs, and an 18-inch long tongue?
I wonder why Dave chose these amazing facts instead of how long their penis is. Look it up. The average length is 40 inches. Truly impressive what God focuses on, isn't it? Praise Jesus, the giraffe, as an 18-inch tongue. Really makes you wonder.
Well, there's only one animal living today that fits that bill.
Only one? Is that it? The last remaining giraffe? Is that really the one and only animal that fits that description? I don't know. I mean, the emu isn't quite as large, and it only goes on 2 legs. That's almost arguably more impressive. And it's also got the long neck and all that. Just something to think about. But birds don't have penises, I guess. And they don't have really much of anything in impressive tongues either. So, I guess we'll go with the giraffe.
And that's the stately giraffe.
The stately giraffe. It's going to go before Congress and deliver an address about how things ought to be. The stately giraffe.
One of the really neat things about the giraffe's neck is that when it leans down to take a drink of water, you would think that all the blood would run to its head. They would pass out, you would say.
If I only had a brain.
It's not that impressive, David. Do you ever wonder why the blood doesn't all rush to your feet when you're just kind of standing there? It's because it's got a heart.
But they have a 25-pound heart with over twice the blood pressure of humans.
Which is probably good considering they are more than twice as large as humans. If God's such a great engineer, why does he need a 25-pound heart to move all that blood? I wonder. Why couldn't it be proportional as the size goes up instead of needing to be larger in proportion as the animal gets larger? Anyway, don't think about it. God's a great engineer.
But they don't pass out or receive too much blood pressure.
That's what she said.
You see, the giraffe's neck has reinforced blood vessels and valves that restrict the blood flow when their heads are down.
You know what else it has? It has the vagus nerve that goes way from one side all the way up the other, back down the other, and then reconnects to the organ it goes to. Why on earth would you call that a feat of engineering when it could have just gone from here to here? David. I wonder if David's going to bring up this well-known flaw in this line of reasoning. This argument that's been done 1,000 times, and that David just should do 1,001. To drive it home and tell us how the vagus nerve is actually a really cool design, rather than one that just looks like it happened to have evolved that way.
Have you ever gotten dizzy when you stood up too quickly?
Not really. Maybe when I'm drunk. Do giraffes get drunk? That'd be something to see, wouldn't it? Drunken giraffes.
So why don't giraffes get dizzy and fall over when they lift their heads quickly up to 19 feet?
I think occasionally they do get dizzy and fall over.
Well, it seems that they have something similar to a sponge in their heads that releases just the right amount of blood to the brain until their blood pressure equalizes.
Fascinating. It's almost like it happened in reverse. Like the giraffe managed to get a longer and longer neck because its body adapted to the fact that it has to eat the leaves off the trees. And also, the ones who did die from putting their heads down just didn't live long enough to reproduce. And the ones with the spongier brain cavities did. But, I digress. Gotta be special. Gotta be special. God definitely made it that way. Except for, the parts that he didn't, I guess.
It's pretty amazing.
It's very amazing that evolution happens, Dave. Yes, You're correct, David.
Now let's talk about their legs.
You're gonna skip the vagus nerve? Why, David? Isn't it also a wonderful feat of engineering that your god did? Oh, maybe not. It's amazing how the giraffe is brown, just like all the dirt around it that it has to camouflage into. It's great that it has a broken up pattern on it, so that the predators that chase him down can't tell how many there are from a distance. But he didn't talk about those characteristics. Anyway.
When walking, giraffes alternatively move both right legs and then both left legs. When running, their back legs reach past the front legs before they move forward, and they kick those powerful legs when fighting off predators, so successfully that they can fight off pretty much anything except lions.
It's so amazing they can fight off pretty much everything except the thing that evolved better to hunt them down. God's plan is wonderful. He created all these special things in the giraffe just so the lion could have a better lunch and destroy it all. I mean, maybe God's into that kind of thing, self-flagellation. But if I engineered something, and then I engineered something else to destroy it, you might call me crazy.
They can live up to 25 years in the wild. We've talked about the control of blood pressure in the giraffe's head. But why doesn't blood pool in their legs?
Oh, snap. We're going to call him X. Because X going to give it to you. The answer. Come on.
Well, it seems that the special strong and tight skin in their legs prevents that.
So it's not a miracle of the pumping of the heart that does it. It's just the biology of how the legs work and how capillary action works and so on. Fascinating how your God designed these traits that work because they evolved slowly over time. Anyway.
How special is it?
Not very. It works kind of the same in every animal. We all have capillaries that rely on capillary action to do their job, and we have hearts that pump us, at least if you're a mammal, or something with a heart. Fish, marsupials, and so on. It's not very special at all. It's a trait we all have. We also have this thing where we lay down for half of our lives. It helps a little bit too.
Scientists have studied the skin of the giraffe's legs when designing flight suits for fighter pilots and astronauts.
Cool stuff. But if God let us go into space, why didn't God just make us with spacesuits? Why did we have to discover how they work? Why did we have to tear apart the animals and see how they work just to go and model things after them? Why couldn't God give us that knowledge when Adam named all the animals? And God gave us other knowledge when we ate from the tree of knowledge, but we didn't get that knowledge because God didn't have it, I guess? Who knows?
Just like me, people have been fascinated with giraffes for thousands of years.
Oh, have they? Have they, David? Fascinating. Fascinating, David. When are you going to get back to the 40-inch penis? David, are you fascinated by that also? David.
Did you know the Egyptians actually kept them as pets, and they gave them their own hieroglyph?
Did you know some people do still keep them as pets? And also take pictures of them? Some people even take pictures of their own shit. And there's the little poo emoji. Must be the work of God. Right, David?
Now, throughout Africa, they're depicted in art, including petroglyphs, pictures carved into rocks. The same is true for Greece and in Rome.
And?
Now, how could anyone overlook the stately giraffe?
A really tall ladder?
Amazing creatures with unique features that can teach us a lot about life itself.
Can it, David? It'll teach us about life itself. Okay.
The biblical book of Genesis, which seems to be written as a historical narrative.
No, David. No, it doesn't. Because chapter 1 disagrees with chapter 2. Because in chapter 1, as it says right there, in the beginning, God created the earth. And then God made the waters. And then the light. But then, in Genesis 2, it says that God created the plants, and then he sent the waters after them. Which means that the light must have been there if the plants were growing. Even though the rains didn't come until after the plants. Even though they came before the plants. Hashtag historical.
Mentions a creator who made all plants and animals and also created mankind.
Alright, David, I mention a Big Bang that happened, and everything else in history happened after it. It must be true because I mentioned it. Somebody wrote it in a book, that's why it's true, right, David? It happens to mention it. That's what makes everything true. Well, Harry Potter is mentioned in the Harry Potter books. I guess Harry Potter is real. Right, David? The Harry Potter books mention him. He must exist, right? We wouldn't write down things that aren't absolutely true onto pieces of paper or in caves. Right, David?
With the ability to appreciate, study, and help and protect and conserve the things that we find in nature.
Except that in Genesis, it also says all the animals are to serve us, not the other way around. David, so which is it? Is your God right? And the animals are there to serve us and screw them if they die? Or are we here to serve the animals and keep them alive? And keep them for some other benefit than our own? David. You even mentioned Genesis. I know you've read it. I know you know these things are in there. Anyway, that's about the end of that video. So let's jump right over to GirlDefined and their videos. Specifically this one, Why Sexual Abuse is Never Okay. A response to their own video about how women who get raped are not sexually pure, except now all of a sudden they are. Don't get me wrong, sexual abuse is bad. But the Bible doesn't hold that view. Now let's see what GirlDefined has to say about why sexual abuse is never okay.
Hey y'all, it's Kristen and Bethany here with GirlDefined Ministries.
Hi! Why would you even start this kind of video this way?
And today we're going to be talking about why sexual abuse is never okay.
Well, that's good. At least they come straight out and say it. Let's see what happens.
As we talk about sexual abuse, we want to first say that this topic is huge and massive.
The topic is both huge and massive. Okay.
And in one small video, we cannot possibly say every important thing that needs to be said on this topic.
Yeah, you can. You can say sexual abuse is bad. You can say, if you've been the victim of sexual abuse, report it. You can say, it's not your fault if you get sexually abused. And you can say, here's some phone numbers that you can call, or you can Google sexual abuse hotline, and you can get help. What you said in the last video was nothing of that sort. And I just said it in 30 seconds. And this is a 12-minute video I'm responding to. Well, 11 and a half.
If you or someone you know has been a victim of sexual abuse, we want to first say that we are deeply sorry.
So the first thing you want to say isn't go to the authorities. You want to apologize that it happened. Okay, I guess. Weird flex, but okay.
This act is evil, and it breaks our hearts, and it breaks God's heart.
So it's evil, and your God can do nothing about it. Maybe you should leave him out of this in the future. If he is so impotent as to be able to do absolutely nothing about it, why do you keep bringing him up? And if he can do something about it, and chooses not to, then why are you worshiping him? And why are you convincing others to do so?
And in fact, we're close to several people who have been victims of sexual abuse, and being close to them and watching them walk this journey, it has been a long and challenging season for them.
Right. So if your God is real, pray for him to stop it. And if he won't, maybe the first thing out of your mouth shouldn't be, "We're sorry." It should be, "Let's go to the police station."
According to the Center for Family Justice, about 1 in 4 women are abused in their lifetime.
Fair enough, I guess. I'm not going to argue statistics in this video. It doesn't matter for the purposes of what we're discussing.
This sobering statistic is really a sad reminder that abuse isn't just something that's happening out there, but something that's happening all around us.
Yes, it very well could be. That's actually a good point. The abuse tends to come from someone you know. That is important. Why does God make families if he knows they're going to abuse each other? I don't know. I don't worship him, I guess.
And so as we're talking to people, as we're interacting with women, let's be mindful as we're asking questions to go deeper if something seems concerning.
Right. And also don't make videos telling us that women should follow the biblical standards of only asking questions of their men. Maybe don't go around telling people that they should wear modest things. Or that you're impure if you get your first kiss before marriage.
Hey guys, it's Bethany and Kristen from GirlDefined Ministries, and today we are going to be talking about why I saved my first kiss for marriage. But when you watch this, I will be doing all sorts of kissing, and I'm not ashamed of that. I'm so excited. I think both of us.
Yeah, I remember
We
this.
read these books by some Christian authors, and they were sharing about how they, did not grow up in a Christian home, and they had all sorts of boyfriends and girlfriends and did all sorts of stuff that they did not, like about. They kind of regretted it and wish they hadn't. And when they kind of became Christians and got more serious, they met each other and they were like, what if we did something so radical? What if we waited until we were husband and wife to actually kiss for the first time? And you were a little bit older, but we both read it near the same time. And I remember in that moment thinking, wow, I wonder if I could do something like that, because I know God says that we should save sex for marriage and that intimacy ultimately is reserved for marriage. But what about kissing? What about some of those smaller things like that? Like, what if we could save that or not do that until we get married? So I'm so excited to experience this bit of intimacy, kissing with my husband on our wedding day. Like, it's gonna be so amazing. So no matter what you take from this video, we hope that you'll just be inspired to think about just those smaller aspects, I guess, of romance in kind of a newer way. And in a recent Q&A video that we posted, many of you expressed concern about the non-consensual part of her email. We are grateful for your concerns and we completely agree with you.
You completely agree, but you also completely ignored it in that video. Mr. Atheist is a lot more forgiving than I am in this regard. Because I understand you're giving an I'm sorry video, an apology video. But at the same time, it's your book, your videos, and the Bible upon which you base these views you have in the first place, and those three things don't appear to have changed. GirlDefined. So now, unlike Mr. Atheist, I'm going to be less charitable in my analysis of the words that come out of your mouth. Especially when you tell girls they should be modest because that's how you stay pure.
Hey guys, it's Kristen and Bethany here, and we want to talk with y'all about untold truths about dressing modestly. And I didn't understand why it really mattered. And so I think a lot of us, and the reason that there's a lot of negative connotations that go along with modesty today is that so many of us don't really understand the purpose, the meaning, the reason, the value behind it. And so we want to debunk some of those myths by sharing some truths about why modesty really matters.
Why do we wear clothes in the first place? Genesis, back to the garden, because if we don't start there, we won't understand how we got here.
Realizing that my body, my life, what I wear, everything about me as a person, as a Christian woman, I should be striving to live for God's glory. That my body isn't really about me, it's about me using my life in a way that glorifies God, that reflects His purity, that desires to honor Him. And that's what God ultimately cares about, is that we as Christian women would have hearts that want to honor God and would want to dress and live in a way that really brings Him glory. Am I dressing in a way that's pure?
So often I feel like we do the exact opposite, you know? We start first with the rules and then we go, okay, wait, now that I don't like this, which is why we didn't like it at first. But
one verse that we come back to again and again in Ephesians 5:1 says, therefore be imitators of God as beloved children. So we're God's children, we're His beloved children, and He's calling us to be imitators of Himself. And when we step back and say, okay, well, who is God? Some of His character qualities are that He's pure. It's to be humble, a humble representation of our God in a manner of humility. And that it's about me using my life in a way that glorifies God in humility, in purity.
When you think about modesty, you probably weren't necessarily thinking we were going to say that. So we just want to challenge you the next time you go shopping, or even the next time you get dressed in the morning and you're like, hey.
And then you turn around and say, but if you're a victim, then that doesn't count. It does to the person who got the sexual assault against them. Because you can't just magically wave a wand and make the assault go away and make someone so they've never had sex. Once it's happened, GirlDefined. And again, I don't agree with Mr. Atheist here either, and a few others. I don't think this kind of rhetoric from them is useful about purity and modesty in the first place. because it feeds the underlying message that exists. But anyway, back to their response. At least they're trying.
Therefore, I want to read the same question that we previously read in our Q&A video and take some time to specifically focus on the non-consensual part of the email.
Which is what you should have done in the first place. You can't just go back now and mop it up like you never said it, and like your Bible doesn't condone those ideas. Denounce the Bible while you're at it for sharing the same views you had in that video. Maybe.
She says, "Dear GirlDefined, I'm sure you probably won't read this, but it feels good to let it all out to someone who would have some good advice, and I would really appreciate it if I did get a response.
And now you've got more than one so that they can make more clickbait and apologize for screwing up, even though they have a history of videos establishing the link that modesty and purity are the same thing.
I was raised in a Christian household, but as I started getting into my teen years, I found I was straying further and further away from God and His Word."
Which is fine by me. The Bible is full of stuff that is absolutely terrible.
"I've done things with boyfriends in the past, some with and without consent."
Right. And it doesn't say whether the girl or the boy is the one who didn't give consent. Well, will they touch on this point or not?
"I've been really wanting to get back into my spirituality and relationship with God for a while now, but I'm not sure how to even start or if that's even possible with the things I've done in the past."
Right, and you gotta remember, they said the sexual stuff still makes you impure. But not if it's assault for some reason, according to the Bible. Which is completely wrong. The Bible doesn't have that opinion. The Bible says you are either pure or you are not, and it doesn't really matter how that came about in the Bible, at least, the very book you're basing your entire worldview off of.
"Is it even possible to re-purify yourself from sex outside of marriage?"
And in the Bible, the answer is no. A definitive, resounding no. In fact, harlots are to be stoned in the Bible. Revelation 27, is it? The beast and the harlot. And so on.
"And if so, what does that look like? I'm terribly lost right now and would really appreciate a response or even a video talking about these topics or talking about situations that people who haven't always been Christians might run into."
And there's the thing. Again, it's from the Christian perspective, and this is GirlDefined. They're running everything from the Christian perspective through their lens of hair dye, or whatever it is.
"Thank you so much, and your videos have been inspiring me a lot lately." When it comes to sexual activity, one of two things are happening. Either one, we are willing participants in the sexual activity, or two, sexual actions are being done against us without our permission.
And in the Bible, both of them make you impure, because in the Bible, women are property and are not allowed to give consent in the first place. But you don't understand this.
There's a very clear and distinct line between the two.
Only because you think there is. That line doesn't exist in the Bible.
I think we can all agree that, in spite of our religious background or upbringing, that we are all responsible for the sexual choices that we freely and willingly choose to make.
No, the Muslims would not agree with you. And the reason they disagree with you on this point is because they agree with you on the modesty point. They believe that they have to cover their bodies, otherwise they are consenting.
Pure.
You also have this thing about modesty in almost all of your videos, where you're talking to young women and saying they should cover their bodies up.
Genesis.
Because the Bible says to do it. The same way the Quran says to do it. Because they're both based on the old Jewish text.
That's what God ultimately cares about.
And the point remains, you don't understand. You can't just say, there's two kinds of sex, but really, the Bible still says be modest in all the other videos we've made.
Purity.
And it doesn't matter what religion you are, except if
Purity.
you do this under Sharia law,
In humility.
which is a good third of the world almost,
Pure.
you'll be beheaded for it, potentially.
Why do we wear clothes in the first place?
For tempting men. It does matter, your religion. And pretending it doesn't change that fact. As we'll see.
And I think we can all agree that we are not responsible for the sexual abuse that happens against us without our consent.
And I'm glad we can agree on that. and not base our opinions on the Bible in this regard, because sexual assault is bad. I know this regardless of what the Bible or the Quran tells me.
When we first read that email from that girl, it seemed to us that she was specifically asking questions about her own past sexual choices and whether or not she could get back on track with her relationship with God and move forward in walking in purity.
Right, which is what she put there, and you interpreted it however you like, because you interpreted her letter the exact same way you interpret the Bible, to mean whatever you think it means, rather than actually reading the words that are written in black and white in front of you. It's a common theme here. And across all of YouTube, don't get me wrong, it's not just these two. But these two are much more egregious offenders than a great deal of the rest of YouTube.
Our response to her questions in the previous video were mainly focused around answering those questions. However, looking back, we can clearly see now that not addressing the non-consensual sexual part was a huge oversight on our part.
But it's not really a huge oversight. You shouldn't make a video on something for which you are not well versed. When you're tackling a subject as tricky as this one, as layered as this one, as complex and sensitive as this one is, you should maybe try to comprehend what the letter is saying before you respond to it. Just maybe.
And so just to be clear on terms, non-consensual sexual activity is when someone else forces their sexual choices on you without your permission.
Or, again, depending on the way it was written, she forced herself on someone else. It is ambiguous in the wording, and that's kind of the part you're missing. Yes, but we'll continue as though she's the one who didn't consent. That's fair, because I think that's what the letter actually means. But it is a part that you're overlooking, GirlDefined. But either way, a sexual act is still a sexual act. Or it's like saying, can I come back to life because I didn't consent to die when someone killed me? Once something has happened, it's happened regardless of whether it's good or bad or your fault or not. And unfortunately, in the Bible, anyway, that doesn't change just because you think it should. But again, I don't believe in things like purity. Yeah, sexual assault's bad, and that shouldn't happen to anyone. But you can't change the fact that it did happen. So the way they're addressing this is not the best way to address it, just to say, oh, pretend it didn't happen. Because as any victim of rape will tell you, they can't just pretend it didn't happen. GirlDefined.
This is sexual abuse or assault. This is an awful thing, and it is never okay.
Perfect. I agree with that.
And we want you to know that if you are a victim of sexual abuse or assault, that you are not responsible for the actions that someone else committed against you.
Fair enough. But it doesn't mean it didn't happen. If a man is in an accident and his legs become paralyzed, it doesn't really help to say, well, it's not your fault. It doesn't fix the fact that that man can never go and be productive with his legs again. And again, I'm not trying to compare sex to paralysis or anything of that nature. But the point remains, if you are traumatized in a sexual way, you may never be able to have sex again, whether or not you think God is okay with it. And that's how out of touch these girls are, which is fine. I'm glad they have this innocent frame of reference. But I think they should have just said, we're not the people who should be addressing this. Someone else should be. But again, that's just my opinion. I'm also not a victim of sexual assault. I'm just saying I disagree with them in these points.
And in fact, we want you to know that you are not damaged goods as a result of sexual abuse. Your worth, value, and identity are not determined by what evil people do against you. Your worth, value, and identity is determined by the loving God who created you.
And there we go. You're bringing it back to God. God created you. He also created the rapist. And he allegedly knows everything that's going to happen before he does it, including the fact that he knew he was going to create a rapist. Do you see why this logic doesn't work for those of us who do not believe in a God? GirlDefined. Is it clicking yet? I want to know if your neurons are firing. Or if it's just a vacuum and the sparks are just kind of nowhere.
If you've been abused in the past or are currently being abused, we cannot urge you enough to stop and take these next 4 steps seriously to get help immediately.
If you're being abused, we encourage you to stop.
Bruh.
What would you do with a brain if you had one?
Are you paying attention?
Oopsie!
Ha! Gotcha.
Oh man, oh jeez, oh.
Yeah, I don't know where to go with that one. That's gonna be the end of this video, I guess. If you enjoyed that, click like if you enjoyed the first half of this video. Because nobody's gonna enjoy the second half. Leave a comment down below and talk about whatever you want. I guess. Share this video if you feel like it, although, honestly, I can understand why you wouldn't. And as always, this has been Reverend JR, signing off. Mumbai businessman Raphael Samuel Let's try that again.